Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to our second webinar for the Women Connect Challenge series that we're doing. It's so exciting to see people join this webinar. I'm going to start a little slowly so more people can join in from the waiting room. But hello, Sheila and Katie and Dr. Strong and Dr. Barr. It's it's fun. And Hyvei, oh my gosh, it's so fun to see everybody join. I just want to hug everybody, especially after this last year of isolation. So delighted to have you here. This is a speaker series that we're doing, a 4-part series the entire month of May. So I hope you join us for our next 2 after this. And I see some people returning from our one last week. So we have amazing people today. Dr. Tim Unwin, who's been probably one of the most influential people in my career, and Gemma Ferguson from Equal Access International, who's going to be talking about her Women Connect Challenge program that she designed for Equal Access. And it is absolutely one of my favorites. And I wish we could just replicate it everywhere. I'm not quite sure why we can't. Super excited about today. Let me just do a few background slides, some housekeeping, etc. Let me get into this. Also, there's going to be a competition for how many pieces of art do I own that have cats in it. So that will be the poll question at the end. Totally kidding. Let me go ahead and share some slides here. Oh, great to see some organizations that I've never had on webinars before. This is fabulous. So just a little bit about why we're doing this. Obviously, there's so much attention around the gender digital divide, and that's wonderful to see. There's been so many webinars and podcasts and opportunities recently to discuss this while we've had a chance to really step back this last year and evaluate what we're doing in the gender space, exacerbated, of course, by the digital and social divides that COVID has made all more evident. So really enjoying the fact that there's sort of a lot of energy around this and a chance to either bring new thinking to old projects to help improve them or to start new projects altogether. So just a little basis on sort of why we're doing this, of course, is the fact that we're nowhere near UN SDG 5B, which is, of course, the empowerment of women through the use and access of technology. And as somebody who's both a feminist and a technologist, the combination of the two should really just be this amazing force multiplier that just creates these opportunities and this sustainable development. And yet they continue to work against each other. That's been well documented since we had Dr. Sophia Heyer on last week. You know, she wrote the first paper really on this on 1997. So we've known about the gender digital divide and what was coming and then what is happening and now what is going to happen unless we actually address this thoughtfully and creatively and comprehensively. So we started the Women Connect Challenge. This was so exciting for me at leaving academia to come and work for USAID's Partner Digital Frontiers at DAI to really design this program, which is now in its 4th iteration, with the focus of looking at the social norms and cultural barriers that keep women offline and underconnected, and the fact that the last several millions of women that we want to get online can't, not because of their economic status, not because of their skill level per se, but because people in their community simply don't want them to. As we know, empowered women are somehow terrifying to the status quo, and gender and development organizations have known this and have been working on this for decades and decades, and yet we still keep throwing the same technology into communities and expecting a different result, which never happens if we're not taking women's unique information needs and their cultural and societal realities into account. So I'm happy to say that we've had over 1,000 proposals in our 4 rounds. We have funded 16. We have some new fundees here on the webinar with us. Heifer International, hey Andrew, Media is here, AFCHICS is a returning winner, I'm super excited. And then our 4th awardee is NIVI. So what the programs have really shown is, what I'm boiling down to as 5 actionable strategies, really, that we need to take advantage of in every time we design a digital development project or really any development project. Important to note that, of course, we always see in all the literature, oh, it's skills, it's access, it's literacy, it's lack of relevant content that keep women offline. And I would say all of those are really rooted in the fact that, women occupy a much diminished position in their societies, and that's why they don't have the purchasing power. That's why they don't have the literacy. That's why they don't have the opportunities. That's why it's unsafe for them to go to places where maybe the community network is offering free coverage or affordable coverage. So bringing the technology to women, doing it in an appropriate way, and also challenging the social norms and really working with the men, the religious figures, the community leaders, the mother-in-laws, the employers, anybody that is a naysayer for women's empowerment, really working with them to engage them and understand what are the opportunities and what are the on-ramps that make sense to connect the rest of the world's women that are still underconnected. Just a quick map of where we're working. The other fun thing with this is the Women Connect Challenge also helps spawn off an activity with Microsoft and USAID with their airband ISPs, working specifically to engage unconnected women in their communities and the changes that they are needing to make in their programming. So very excited about that. Our round 4 should be announced very soon, the winners of that. That's an India-specific instance of Women Connect Challenge, and really excited about that because there will be 10 winners that are just on the subcontinent, especially at a time when connectivity is so absolutely dire to get that good, useful information during this awful crisis that's hard for anyone to comprehend. I will, if you'd like the slides, we'll make them available afterwards, but I have put some links if you're new to this space, if you'd like to see what USAID has done, if you'd like to see what Digital Frontiers is doing. We've got some great starting points. I am always available. I will put my email in the chat window because I'm obviously incredibly passionate about this. I've been working on this for over 20 years. And I'm happy to say we are seeing some changes. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of threats to those changes. And that's why I am bringing on our speakers today. As you'll know with this speaker series, I've been trying something a little different where we have an eminent researcher, in the topic that we're discussing, along with a very successful practitioner, kind of to give that both how and why of the gender digital divide vis-a-vis social norms and cultural barriers. And the first person I need to introduce, needs no introduction at all. He's really been the most influential person in my career in ICT for development, Dr. Tim Unwin. You'll know him as he helped start this field. His book, ICTD, was the textbook that I would use with my students. He's Professor Emeritus at Royal Holloway, University of London. He's been the CTO of the Commonwealth Organization. His work on education and equity, recently with his great study on COVID and technology, his work with engaging stakeholders in very different places. I have the biggest professional crush ever on Dr. Tim Unwin, and I'm going to turn it over to him right now. Hi, Tim. Thanks for joining us from London.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And I feel very humble in front of everything you've said. What I'd like to do today, and I'm sort of the researcher, the academic, even though I feel I'm more of a practitioner now. But it's lovely to have a man speaking. Just a shame that there aren't more men actually listening and participating. But I've got about 12 minutes, and I'd like to do really a couple of things. First, share with you some reflections, and very much along the lines of, as I've got older, I realize the less I know, and I've become more questioning. So I think actually the role of researchers is to question, to challenge accepted norms. And that's what I'd like to do to begin with, just on a couple of points. And then share with you some of the work we've been doing in an organization we set up a few years ago called Tech Together, which is about technology equality together. But following on from what Revi said, the one message I'd like you to take away is that men have to be involved much more passionately and committedly in supporting women's empowerment through technology. If we are part of the problem, the patriarchs, we have to be part of the solution as well. But let me begin by two sort of semi-theoretical points, but Revi said, Tim, remember that most of the audience are practical people, so I will try and keep theory very light. The first is, and Revi, you used the word gender there, and I think something I've come to realize is that the UN uses the term gender when more often than not it actually means women. And so when I use the word gender, I think it's terribly important that it's used to refer to the whole LGBTIQ agenda. And that's a whole field that has been, vastly under analyzed, misunderstood throughout. But women are themselves obviously at the heart of so many other issues and need to be treated, and if you like, in a separate, I hate the word category, but we do tend to use men and women in opposition, and there is the blurring in the middle. So today I'm going to focus on women, not gender, but I think it's important to recognize that this research must be broader in gender, and it's great that Women Connect focuses on women, UN Women focuses on women, and that's important. But let's not forget the LGBTIQ agenda. The second sort of more conceptual and theoretical and challenging point that I'd like to share with you is around universals, relatives, and inclusion. Much of global rhetoric at the moment, particularly through the UN system, is, I think, focusing on the pursuit of a universal solution. That's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There is one way of doing things correctly. There's the pursuit of best practices. And I've increasingly come to realize, I think, through my research and practice, that much of the world needs to be seen through a relative lens. That more often than not, it's not possible simply to translate one digital solution to another context and see the same results. We have to situate what we do within particular contexts, within particular environments. Different people see things and do things in different ways. And I actually would go beyond that, and I haven't written much about this, a little bit. Something I want to pursue further is that actually the pursuit of universals serves the interests of the most powerful, not the interests of the most marginalized. And I think about that in the context, we've been doing some work on the environment recently. And you have all the global voices about climate change and carbon. And yet, if you go and talk to rural women in the Kelabit Highlands in Sarawak or in some very isolated parts of the world, their understanding of the environment is fundamentally different. So universals to me are something quite dangerous. They very often lead to people saying there is such a thing as a best practice. And I always encourage people to be cautious. Whenever anybody uses the term best practice, for me, they want to sell you something. They want to sell you their best practice, which is the solution for all the problems you're interested in. And actually, I think we have many good practices, and Revi's initiative and USAID's work has actually been about getting lots of different practices and then trying to draw some generalizations from them. But I've sort of shifted to wanting to understand the relative, and I'll explain why towards the end of my talk. I should have begun, of course, by saying Eid Mubarak to all our Muslim friends today, and hoping that you have a peaceful and happy day, and thank you for joining us. The relatives, important. So what about Tech Together? What have we done about this? Well, much of the dominant rhetoric is about the solution for the need to include women in digital tech is, I think, led by powerful voices in European, North American, UN, a largely white context, not so much male. And yes, there's great work happening in Africa, and I have huge admiration for my female friends in many African countries and in parts of South Asia as well. But I think there's a dominant model which is linked to the nature of global capital at the moment, or liberal democracy, which is often in danger of advocating a particular set of universal solutions that may not be appropriate in the local context. So we, with Liz Quaglia and some colleagues in different parts of the world, in discussions actually with UN Women and the Global Equals Initiative, that there's a huge gap in what's being done at the moment. If we don't change men's attitudes and behaviors, many of the social structures, the political structures, the economic structures that have led to these inequalities and a lack of female empowerment through digital tech will persist. So we set up this very small volunteering organization called Tech Together, TEQ, Technology Equality Together, to go about changing men's attitudes and behaviors towards digital and tech. And we've been involved in a number of things, particularly the creation of a set of guidance notes. And these are based on rigorous research, but also practice, and are developed collaboratively and are in multiple languages and even in some audio. And the idea is to set some guidance notes, some simple things, so 5 or 10 things that people in particular contexts can do, and maybe 5 or 6 that they shouldn't do as well. And then we've rolled these out through some workshops, and it's been privileged to work with groups like Anita B and others. And so it's great to have an opportunity to just share a couple of minutes on this with you today. Our guidance notes are divided into sort of 4 broad categories, things like personal things that you can do in terms of HR and employment, in terms of events and workshops, and in terms of academic research. So, for example, in one of the personal things, we realized that actually, you know, I was once a boy, and if I didn't get things right in my mind about women and tech when I was a boy, it's pretty unlikely that they're going to change further down the road. So advice for what we can do to help boys understand women and tech, what things fathers can do to help their daughters. I think I was hugely influenced by my mother, who was a mathematician. So I've always had women scientists and tech people in my life. But in HR and employment, how many organizations actually run their job descriptions or their employment adverts through a gender checking piece of software to see, wow, is actually the way I'm shaping this job going to prevent women from applying for it? And then running events and workshops, something I've absolutely championed for many years, has been the need for a gender sensitive conference organization. And I was shocked earlier in my career about the abuse and harassment of many women at international conferences, particularly by the UN, but others as well suffered. And so it's great to see the UN now has that in place. So we developed these, and I draw to a conclusion here, suddenly realized that many of these were actually based on good practices in Europe, North America, and much less so in the local contexts where relative ideas are important. So we did some work together with lots of colleagues, and they did most of the work. I was there listening and understanding. I don't speak fluent Urdu, for example, but in Pakistan, and trying to understand what the factors were that meant that women were not employed and not very high profile in the digital tech sector. And we came up with some fascinating answers. We developed a set of guidance notes in Urdu and spoken as well. And the key message, really, that came across, the 2 most important things that our colleagues wanted us to focus on. One was actually how brothers can help their sisters. And these views came from both young women and young men. And so it was trying to bring together these ideas. And it was realized that very often women suffer abuse and harassment online because they don't know enough about the tech. And in the past, they've often gone to their brothers and saying, well, I can't resolve this. And so a little bit of advice for brothers is actually help your sisters or your mothers or to actually have confidence in using that technology safely and wisely. And just a tangent here, another bit of our research has been on the horrendous way through which digital technology is being used to abuse and harass women across the world, and violence against women through digital is something that we really have to grapple with. Another finding we had was actually we spoke with a number of young CEOs of startups and medium-sized companies, and they said, yes, we want to make our environments more friendly to attract more women into our companies because they have something that they can contribute hugely. But they didn't know how to do it. So we did a series of guidance notes on ways through which CEOs in companies in Pakistan could create learning, working environments. that were more friendly. And just a final point, it's about, I hate the word intersectionality, but it is about things coming together. Because one of the main factors that was putting off women working in the Pakistani tech sector, and I see there are some friends from Pakistan here, so you can come in discussions later, was that actually the whole industry, a lot of it, is based on outsourcing work from the west coast of the USA, 12-hour time difference. And in a society where women are concerned about being out at night, or where the expectation put on them by their mothers, their husbands, their brothers, maybe, is that women should be at home in the evenings. And I don't challenge that. It's something that matters, and the ultimate thing is that women should have choice, I think. But in those societies, women don't want to be working all through the night in not a very nice working environment. In startup companies, for example. So I could talk for hours on this. I'm going to shut up now. Two takeaways, I think. One is, please, men need to change their attitudes and behaviors towards women in tech. Let's all work together to help that, and we'd be delighted to work with you. And the other is, let's not be so sure that we're right. Let's not be so sure that the ideas we're promoting are not actually trying to impose a new form of tyranny. Let's listen to local voices. Let's understand better the local context in which tech is used. Because only if we do that can we develop solutions with people that will help their empowerment. Revi, I hope that has given some food for thought and discussion. I will close here.
You're amazing as always. I really appreciate the points you've made. Obviously, people in the chat have appreciated the comments you've made as well. Thank you for really setting the stage for our next speaker, Gemma Ferguson of Equal Access International. And it's great to have so many people from Nigeria on this line. Hi, Ore. I love WTech, as you know, and thanks. I'm glad you're here to listen to this Kano-based project. And I think what Gemma's going to do is really situate a lot of what Tim was talking about, the local cultural context, the working with men, brothers, etc. There's so many ties into bringing women into technology and technology to women with the help and not the hindrance of power brokers in the community. So I'm delighted. Gemma is amazing. We've tapped her so many times to give talks, and she's done so. She's been so willing with her time. Really appreciate the work she has done with USAID. She came up with the social and behavioral change communication model for the Tech for Families project. And I have to say, this is one of our most successful projects by far with the Women Connect Challenge. I'd love to see it replicated. It's one of those projects that really walks that line between being very steeped in the cultural, local context, and yet there are parts of it that are easily replicable and generalizable to other communities where you have such gender and power dynamics in play. So Gemma, I think I'm going to let you take it away, but I'm such a fan of yours.
Thanks, Revi, and thank you so much for having me to talk today. I'm just really excited to talk about one of my favorite projects, really, Tech for Families. So as Revi mentioned, it was funded under the first round of USAID's Women Connect Challenge and was designed kind of broadly to address the normative barriers, particularly at the family and household level, that prevent women and girls access to and use of technology in northern Nigeria. Yeah, I mean, as everyone here, I'm sure, knows, access to and use of technology is neither universal nor equitable. And the northern part of Nigeria is no different. Recent research carried out by our partner, cited in Kano, which is a state in northern Nigeria where the intervention was based, showed that 60% of the female population living there doesn't have access to internet or technology. Now, this was a few years ago, and was what kind of started the idea of wanting to do something around the gender digital divide in that area. But access can mean a lot of different things to different people. And as a norms junkie, this is where it kind of got interesting for me. Because what this research also showed, and what really sparked the idea for Tech for Families, was the role that family dynamics and gender norms around things like purity and honor play in restricting women and girls' access to technology, with husbands and fathers particularly resistant to their wives and daughters being online. So we wanted to dig into this a little bit further, and just as Tim was saying about really kind of understanding the problem and not kind of coming with a preformed solution, we just really wanted to understand what was going on there, what were these norms, what were these attitudes. And so from our formative research, it highlighted gender and religious norms as a strong contributor to women and girls' low levels of access to digital technology in Kano. And this included norms around men's control over women and girls' behavior, and around women's purity and fragility to resist immoral vices online. Basically the feeling that if women were to go online, before you know it, they would be downloading porn, and that would be the end of it for everybody. So norms around women's roles and expectations were also highlighted, in contrast to spending time on the internet. So in essence, again, if a woman was using the internet, she wouldn't be focused on her household chores, and she was more likely to have an affair. And so you can see the percentages there in the blue boxes, if people can see, show the results from our baseline survey. So first we did the formative research, and then we did a baseline survey with a cohort of 15 families that we wanted to work with. And you can see that women and girls' tech skill levels in this group were low. They were not supported in the home to use tech, and fears of community backlash played a strong role in them internalizing these norms and restricting their own use or that of other female family members. So equally, there was high levels of agreement among the men that letting their daughters use the internet would bring shame upon the family, with 80% of men surveyed agreeing or strongly agreeing that a girl who uses the internet is more likely to bring shame on her family, and 90% agreeing or strongly agreeing that a woman who uses the internet was more likely to be disloyal to her husband. So what we were seeing in this cohort that we wanted to work with was very similar to the same sort of things as we'd seen in the formative. Religion and religious leaders were also strong reference groups, with many assuming that religious leaders in Islamic teachings did not approve or support of women and girls using the internet, and therefore men were doing their religious duty by not allowing women and girls online. Whilst it was clear to us that norms had a distinct role in enabling the gender digital divide, evidence and programming focused on norms and technology, particularly at the family level, at this time was pretty nascent. We couldn't really find much other. There was one other lovely PhD student that Ravi put me in contact with who'd done a similar study and had found similar things in Pakistan. And so it was in this kind of gap that the Tech for Families was conceived. So as you can see, this is just sort of saying what our goals and general objective were, and just sort of, again, building on what Tim was saying, kind of this idea of working with the entire family unit. We knew that we needed to bring men in, and the way to do that, we thought, would be was to work with the whole family. We'd had a similar project where we'd work with couples, but this time we wanted to work with the whole families, with brothers, with fathers, and so we made it a whole family model. We also wanted to generate community awareness, so we were also working with religious leaders and with the media, and we wanted to create, hopefully, a case study that proved an approach to closing the gender digital divide that was centered on social norms. So the intervention itself, this is a little excerpt that you can see from our curriculum, which we're finally got around to sort of having fully designed. But so the intervention, basically, as I stated, Tech for Families is grounded in a family-centered approach to social norms change, and uses social behavior change communication approaches to address the barriers that prevent women and girls' access to and use of technology. We based the design on our previous successful norms change intervention in Nepal, which included using radio programming that modeled new norms and behaviors, interestingly including a brother who helped his sister, and also daughters who helped fathers and this kind of thing. Alongside intensive curriculum-based group discussions led by a trained facilitator. The curriculum followed a 3-phase journey of change, which was critically reflecting on existing norms, then building new skills, and finally diffusing positive effects from the initial group out to the wider community. We worked with 15 families, including husbands and wives, and up to 3 children. And each of the 14 sessions, all families would come together, listen to the radio program, discuss it, and then take part in an activity designed to either build a particular digital skill, like how to set up an email account, or a soft skill, like building effective communication between family members. We also wanted to reflect on gender norms and have really direct discussions around that. But at the same time, we also needed to kind of focus on the benefits of tech for all. We wanted to be very inclusive of the men in the room and have them feel like they were also gaining from this. And also, like I was saying, we included religious leaders and female role models to break down some of the fears around the internet and morality, shifting the focus from banning girls from using the internet to keep them safe to talking to sons about sexual harassment online. So between sessions, families would have to do a take-home task. And this was to encourage further discussions at home and also to start to have discussions in the community. This could be something like going to talk to your local imam about the issue, or the family Googling a recipe and cooking it all together. So it could be very different. And we also had 2 days of digital training that was kind of focused entirely on digital skills. Whilst this wasn't a religious intervention, as I said, we wanted to make a really concerted effort to include religious leaders in the programming, and recognizing the role of religion in people's lives. We didn't want our engagement with religious leaders to be tokenistic. So we had religious scholars review and contribute to the curriculum. We had them appear and advise on the radio show, attend the family sessions, and even tasked our family members, like I said, to interact with their local religious leaders to better understand their views on women and technologies. Participants shared how these interactions influenced their realization that Islam did not justify the non-utilization of the internet and technology, but in many ways actually supported it as a tool, like any other tool for learning. So our results. So the combination of approaches we used across the intervention contributed to the unraveling and questioning of previous held fears and resulted in families embracing greater utilization of internet among women and girls. As you can see from the findings, I just picked out a few statistics, but there was a reduction in male members who felt women who used the internet were more likely to bring shame on the family, an increase in men and boys who thought the internet was a positive source of education for women and girls, and a very satisfying 90% of women and girls who at the end line felt supported by their family to access the internet at home. At baseline, this was only about 40% of girls and 20% of women who said they felt supported at home. So overall, we saw a frequency of internet and technology utilization unilaterally increased across all family members, but primarily among women, including improved shared financial responsibility within the household and evolved independence and autonomy as a result of expanding their businesses, for example, online or via WhatsApp. We also saw positive shifts related to gender norms and attitudes more broadly, including attitudes around typical gender roles in the home and women's access to economic opportunities. A final statistic, which I always take as a really positive indicator of the success and acceptance of a program, was the retention rate. We had 87% of participants attending at least 14 out of the 60 meetings. And as I said, that includes husbands, wives, brothers, and sisters. Follow-ups, the previous slide was what we found in our endline survey, but followed up FGDs revealed evidence of improved family cohesion amongst participants too, including more inclusive family discussions and decision-making, more open communication about the internet, better interaction between parents and children, and more effective means of addressing disagreements, particularly related to internet and technology use by different family members. For many, this was the first time that fathers had ever sat down with their children and had discussions like this, both in group settings, but I think more importantly, at home when they were doing their take-home tasks. And I think this focus on building family relationships and communication was really key to the success of the program. We also saw evidence of early diffusion effects of the project benefits and changed attitudes and norms and behaviors from the initial group out to the wider community. This was very nascent. It was just an indication of what could happen, but would need more time and focus in the future to really push out from those groups who were intensively involved to kind of affecting change at the community level. So what's next? So we have this tested and proven curriculum and approach, and like Revi said, we want to scale it. We want to find a way to scale it up. We'd like to embed the curriculum in existing structures and networks, and focus more on the media element and the community diffusion aspect. We have some great access to TV in northern Nigeria, as we're partnered with a TV station that reaches millions. So the possibility of scaling this is very exciting. So that is everything. I'm just going to end on a final quote, and this came not from someone in the group, but someone who'd been listening to the radio program. Thank you.
That was so great. I mean, to look at the stats that 90%, that kind of adoption, and the fact that, I mean, I know your final report to us for the project had amazing quotes that I wish everyone could read. I'd be happy to share as much as we can about fathers saying, I'm actually now going to give my wives and my children phones because I see the benefit. That was really amazing. I really love this project, and I commend you for your just your brilliance and your understanding of social and behavioral communication change, how it works with norms. I mean, this is one of the reasons this project has been so successful. It's going to be Q&A time, so let's have Tim join us as well. And I'm going to start off with a question. And Gemma, while you're on the screen, I'll start with you, and then move to Tim, and then we'll get everybody else's Q&A. But as we know, the major donors, one set of major donors in ICT for development or digital development, have been technology companies. And they're very uncomfortable when we move into discussions of changing social norms or changing the status quo. They just want to drop the technology in and hope that somehow it becomes useful. I mean, obviously, that's not their core competency, working with social scientists, et cetera, for the most part. Obviously, we've shown how problematic this is for years, but the message isn't getting through. How do we really succeed in helping donors and partners understand that the gender digital divide is just a manifestation of in real life gender divides, and that need to be reflected in the program?
I mean, I think one of the things that potential is more research into this. I don't think there's not a huge amount of data to follow this up. And our formative research, it wasn't broad, it wasn't thousands and hundreds of people, but just after a few conversations with people, you could see immediately that it wasn't about access, as in let's give everybody a phone. It was about sex and stigma and all of these things that you wouldn't even consider to be a barrier. And I think hearing that again and again from the people that we spoke to and throughout the project, I think getting that sort of, more research into that and getting that sort of elevated, those voices, those lived experience elevated of people who, who can speak to the fact. And, like we said at the beginning, 80%, I think, of it was of our families. And these were Kano-based sort of pretty cosmopolitan families, and still they were quite happy to say that, yeah, no, I'm not going to let my wife use the internet because she will have an affair. And so, these are so ingrained, and I think we do need more research in that area, and I'm sure Tim would be happy to take up that mantle.
Tim, any thoughts on this?
Hundreds. I have to be careful. And Fatima, thank you for your comment, because I get to take your encouragement to actually say something that I know some people won't like. But I think we have to first of all think of digital as an accelerator. If society is unequal and the majority, the powerful within it, want to make it remain unequal, then throw the kit at it, and it will do that brilliantly. If there is a huge movement for social and communal activities that benefit everybody, then that can happen. I think the former is the dominant. The former is what the UN system and most donors are advocating. This is around universals. Most of the SDGs are about economic growth. They're not about reducing inequality. How many people on this call know which is the SDG about reducing inequalities? It is 10, but half of the indicators in it aren't actually about inequality. So this whole agenda, and most UN partnerships with the private sector are about driving private sector interests, which are about universal. You know, a big corporation wants a universal thing that they can sell that works everywhere. So, you know, digital connectivity, laptops, tablets, whatever it is. And those are not necessarily locally, contextually relatives. That was part of what I was saying about the universals and the relatives. And you know, I think the fundamental change that needs to take place, tech is wonderful. It can be used for amazingly good things. And people with disabilities can have their lives totally transformed, much more so than those of us who have fewer disabilities. The lives of marginalized women and girls can be totally transformed. I was working with what were euphemistically called bar girls in Ethiopia in the early 2000s about using digital tech to enable them to get other skills, which they did, which was fantastic. But that is not the dominant force. The dominant force is, you know, throw the tech at it, as you said, Revi, and there will be a solution. We must begin with the development outcomes that we want to achieve. And for me, it's not the dominant economic growth agenda. It's about reducing inequalities. And if we shift to how tech can do that in the UN and bilateral donors, then we can begin to make a change. But I've got a real sneaking worry, and actually being here today has reinforced it. What does inclusion mean? We talk about inclusion, but that's including the marginalized women in a system which is actually working against them. So, you know, maybe we should move our language away from inclusion. And I like the word empowerment, but it'd take 2 hours to talk about actually what that really means. But maybe I'm thinking we shouldn't use the word inclusion, because that actually is part of this system where we include everybody in this universal extraction. And yeah, how many of us actually have had a week without our digital device? I'm using the word quite carefully now, but yeah, being enslaved to, oh, thank you. This is my wife bringing me a cup of tea. You know, that actually we're enslaved to these devices. And it's a new form of exploitation by global capital. Anyway, I shut up because I'm probably saying things that have upset and offended people. But you know, I'm not saying that is necessarily true. I'm saying that is an argument that we need to understand and pursue if we're going to make the sorts of changes that Women Connect and your fantastic work and Gemma's great work has done. I'll shut up. Sorry, I've gone on for too long.
No, it's wonderful. I love this perspective. So thank you so much for really kind of speaking the truth about this. I mean, we've seen this for so long. And one of the things that always really bothers me is how technology also is such a tax on women in so many situations. You know, I've seen with the Women Connect projects and so many, this idea that, first of all, if we just give them phones, everything changes. And you're like, no, you're absolutely buying into a system that is broken and anti-women's empowerment. At the same time, I also struggle when I see women scrape together all their little tiny bits of savings, you know, to go buy that smartphone because they know that these apps are going to be on it, and they buy the, you know, the hand-me-down phone that's first generation Android that can't even run anything. It's completely pointless. It's a brick. And so we really need to, you know, I think there's something to be said about the fact that this acceleration of technology, by the time it's affordable for most women, we've already doubly jeopardized them and left them behind, because it's just, as technology progresses, we are also growing this gap. Do you see that as well, Tim and Gemma?
Share my screen. Is it possible to share just very quickly a couple of slides, because yes or no, it'll answer your question.
Perfect. Please share.
Okay, let me just very, very quickly. So just as
you're
Gemma,
doing that,
and I'll get this ready to show.
Perfect. Gemma, what about creating new social norms with technology? Tim talks about the fact that we're replicating the same ones. Can we create brand new social norms with women in technology?
I mean, I think we can, and I think we need to. And generally in norm shifting interventions that I've worked on, it's much better to focus on the new norms than to sort of be constantly attacking and trying to get rid of the old ones. It's much easier to move people to new than to kind of tell them that what they're doing is wrong. And I think, I definitely saw, shift in gender roles as women who were involved in the project were able to get more involved in using a lot of what we focused on in the drama, and also what some of the sessions were on were about how you use the phone to kind of contribute to the family budget, and how women can use the phone to enable them to have businesses from home. And I think what we saw, and even this is just in a very short period of time, it was just 16 sessions kind of done every other week, was already husbands being really excited that their wives were able to generate income from using the phone. And then also the fathers were suddenly very proud of themselves. Like you said, they were so proud that that they could take this phone to their daughter and help their daughter to learn and be that, be the person who helped bring that to their daughter. So I think there was definitely kind of shifts in roles, and I think in the long term we can be looking to obviously my understanding is very kind of within the northern Nigerian context, where it is about morality, and I think that is a big shifting technology away from being this Western immoral force is essential. But obviously that's not the case in other countries. It's not always the case that people think that the internet is bringing immorality with it. But I think some of the really interesting things that the religious leaders were saying is it's just a tool for learning. Like, it's like a knife. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. And that really simple understanding and idea kind of really switched on a lot of sort of light that this isn't necessary. It's a tool. It's not the answer. It's just a tool. It's one of many tools that can be used in any way.
Love that. Tim, you have your slides?
Let's just see. Share screen. It may just work. It may not. If it doesn't, we'll stop it.
Well, this is the fun of doing a live event.
Yeah. No, it's not working. But can I just go back to a question then that was on the chat
Yes,
from Courtney Clark? Yes, but I think
let's go to can you rephrase the question? I'll go up and try to find it.
Yeah, Courtney, have you observed any similar divides within schools? For example, boys in a school having more access to tech and the internet than girls in the same school. I mean, just contextual and very specifically, because that was exactly something we were looking at in Pakistan, and we were working mainly with university students and with groups of young women and other groups of young men, and actually all of them universally were saying, pretty much there is pretty similar access. The real trouble is, of course, that there are many parts of the world where girls don't go to school and boys do. So you've got a real chicken and egg problem there. But I do think, and we've done quite a lot of research around how boys approach girls and tech. And this is going to sound, please nobody on the call take this the wrong way. But there's quite a lot of research that's been done, and suddenly it resonates with our work, that actually, unfortunately, boys, when they reach puberty, sort of don't think that girls who do science are particularly attractive. They're geeks. A lot of the girls in 2 or 3 papers I could show that they're showing actually it's those kind of very personal relationships in a school context that limit the aspirations of some girls to going on and working in science and tech. And that even happens, I mean, with students at university, and the context of some of the things that happen are really horrible. Does that go, Courtney, some way? Just do a tick or a yes or a no? Or
Courtney is typing. Gemma, I have to throw this question to you because I always get asked this and I never actually know what to say. And you're our resident social scientist. But this whole idea that universally, from Morocco to India to my female Uber driver here in DC, people say, my husband is so afraid of me going on the internet because he thinks I'm going to have an affair. And of course, infidelity did not start with the web. What is this fear about? Is this just control? What do you see? I mean, you've done this in Nepal, you've done this in Nigeria. We keep hearing this.
I mean, I think from my experiences, it is often it's the unknown, you know, that men know that there's something, you know, that, or a lot of men access porn on the internet and they know what is there, and there's this it sort of links into, I guess, a meta-norm around the idea that women can't control, you know, women and sexuality is a very difficult thing. Women have either no control over their sexuality or are not able to sort of limit themselves. And interestingly, obviously, it's usually men who are using the internet in that way rather than women, and yet it's sort of the onus of blame is pushed on to women. And I think it's this idea that you can't, you know, there's this whole world that could suddenly open up to the woman, and either she'll have no self-control and just get lost in it. And it's what came through in Nigeria is this, like, if you're a good father, if you're a good husband, you will protect. It was done in a positive. I'm just protecting my wife from all of this that exists out there, as opposed to sort of the understanding that women, you know, are very capable of navigating their way through the internet without getting lost in a bevy of porn. And I think so it was just interesting how that turn, it's not seen as a negative thing. It's seen as your role and your responsibility as a good father and husband to keep your wife away from this. And again, this idea that she's going to just be spending her whole time looking at things on the internet's going to open her mind to new worlds, and then she'll leave you. And
well, I think very similarly, I'd love to ask Tim, especially given your work in Pakistan, and Gemma, perhaps you run into this as well, is, you know, do women understand, I mean, what is, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, the threshold for risk. Women understand what it is in their community context much more than we do, and yet we still see things like awful headlines that I've used in many presentations about honor killings, about, you know, a teen being tortured to death and beaten for using a phone, that kind of thing. So, you know, are there communities that simply are not ready for some of these technological and empowerment opportunities we bring in, or should we rely on women to understand their own threshold for risk?
I think this is hugely difficult. I would probably have to go back and say that we can't come up with a universal solution. No, I think something we haven't touched on already that's part of the answer is around, I mean, we work with a psychologist colleague around this in Pakistan, and the attribution aspect is incredibly important. So when a woman is sexually harassed on her mobile phone, the majority of people, both men and women, think she's guilty. When a man is, it's the other person harassing them who's seen as guilty. And I think, you know, pointing that out raises a whole load of questions. Why all too often are women seen as being the guilty ones? I mean, it's like dress, isn't it? You know, how we dress and rape and all those really difficult issues. So I think that's part of it. I think a lot, in direct answer to your question, goes back to something I said earlier. If we know how to use digital tech safely, that makes sense. And the first time I was trolled, I says free bit of how to deal with being trolled advice for everyone on the call: never, ever, ever respond. But it begins not by being something really bad, but then it gets accelerated. Other people come in, so you just must run. But I didn't know that until I was trolled. I'd read stuff, but it's until you're in that situation. So I think it's incumbent on society and men to help their sisters and mothers and daughters to understand how to use tech safely.
And I think education towards, you know, one of the things that we really pushed in the drama was around this blame, just as you're saying, Tim. So, like, not educating women. I mean, yes, know how to keep yourself safe, but it's, you know, it's the same thing as you were saying. It's the same as you know, GBV on the street. It's women should be able to walk alone down a dark street. You know, women should be able to go online without being abused. Educate the men about why they feel the need to do that. And so I think just shifting, and that was one of the characters in the in our drama, kind of went from being someone who was harassing women online and then seeing what happened to his sister, and understanding that maybe he had a role to play in that, and maybe he was the one who needed to look at his behavior and talk to his male friends about appropriate behavior online, rather than, you know, women being appropriate behavior online. I think it's just this, it's what you see offline. It's exactly the same. So much of the drivers of gender-based violence, online or offline, are exactly. Again, we're seeing the blame placed on women, as you said.
And I think we I don't like, again, going back to what we said right at the beginning, talk about women and men, because there are all sorts of, it's not all men, it's not all women, and male rape, is another, there are horrendous things. So I know many men who are afraid of going down a dark alley at night. Yes, there are different scales, but I think we perhaps have to disaggregate these things and say, look, what is the real problem? And then how can we use digital tech to solve it? I mean, let's try and counter on a positive side. One of the issues, and I hope everyone's family on this call is healthy and well at the moment with COVID-19. But one of the biggest impacts of COVID-19 is a huge increase in domestic abuse. But actually, there are ways that digital tech can be used to support women in those contexts. Violence against women through digital tech in the home is bad, definitely. But that tech can also be used in other ways to enable women to call out for help. And there are lots of new things that people have been developing many apps to solve that. And I won't go into the detail. People are familiar with it, but it's both the positive and the negatives we have to understand.
Let me ask one last question, and then I will let everybody go, but this has been so wonderful. We talk about these social norms, we talk about recognizing, we talk about the contextual culture, et cetera. And I definitely want to call out, Janet, we have a great one around FGM reduction rates that Janet and Courtney are talking about with some wonderful GBV apps that Women Connect supported in part. But how do we get our tech partners, our implementing partners, to really understand the need to bring in the social scientists, to bring in the sociologists, the anthropologists, the psychologists? So much of development is fundamentally psychological. I want to go from here to here. How do I get there? I mean, that is a mental and emotional process in so many ways. And we've said this forever. You need to bring in the social scientists. You need to bring in the cultural experts. Tell me more how we can convince people to do that.
Who's going to go first, Gemma?
Should we hold our funding unless that's part of it? I mean, how do we change this?
I think definitely more of researchers and practitioners working together, not in silos. I know that generally my work on gender norms and gender-based violence has been rapidly improved by a long connection work I've done with Emory University, and I just think, I think that needs to happen a lot more, because I may understand some of the ways of implementing projects, but to really understand the theory and the evidence and everything behind it makes a huge difference.
Tim, any closing thoughts? I
don't think I'm quite as optimistic. I think that there are some brilliant young people in bilateral donors, in companies who get this. But the agendas of many donors, not all, aren't actually really, this is going to come across badly, and we have a conversation, but aren't really concerned with this at the heart. And unless they are at the top level, it's very easy to spout. You can join all this international organization showing you're good at this, but unless it was really embedded in the structures of the society that is providing the funding or whatever, whoever is middle ranking or young in those organizations is going to get frustrated because they realize that actually that is not what they give. I mean, let's face it, most bilateral aid organizations serve the interests of the country providing that aid. And many countries in the world, ours, the UK has recently changed. The donor DFID is now part of the Foreign and Commonwealth. At least that is, many people bemoan it, but at least that's actually more honest about the purpose of aid. And then with companies, I think we are beginning to see a shift, but the bottom line and the financial necessities, the whole structures are fundamentally not actually in support of the agenda. So however hard social scientists might work to be within those companies or in the bilateral trade, unless there's that big change. And so in the last 20 years, yes, I've struggled. I've had the privilege to work, with many of these organizations. And I often, I feel like I'm hitting my head against the brick wall much of the time, and it can be really painful. But I think we have to go on, the answer to your question, we have to go on trying to persuade them, showing them the evidence. I'd love to take them actually to some of the villages and places where I work. I use imagery, but we have to have the passion to make change in our societies, because if we don't keep doing it, the future looks pretty grim.
Well, I want to thank you and Gemma for being those people with the passion that keep this going, even though I know you have bashed your head into multiple brick walls and you keep going. And that might be the definition of insanity to many. And to me, it's just the insane desire to see amazing change. Anyhow, I'm going to say thank you so much. I'll follow up offline to thank you in person. Thank you all of everybody that has responded. If we didn't get to your questions, I actually promise that we will. Next week, at this same time, same channel, we have Dr. Laura Hausman and Dr. Araba Say and Hannah Metcalf from Biamo talking about cultivating women's confidence in using technology. And then our final session will be on creating women-centric technology with some other great researchers and practitioners. Thank you so much. Savannah, back to you to close us out.